An unexpected blow to the Longhorns' 2026 recruiting efforts as one of Texas's top targets committed to A&M yesterday. Where do the Horns go from here? Is it time to panic? We'll talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Intro.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are locked on to the Texas Longhorns. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner, Texas grad, Austin local, and longtime sports radio host here in the Lone Star State. Thank you for making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell your Longhorn friends about Locked On, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. We've got SEC schedules for Texas men's and women's basketball. We also have a little preview of another monster recruiting weekend coming up for Texas football. But before we get to some of the good news, unfortunately, we've got some bad news to start a Wednesday show, as Texas was dealt a pretty major blow for their 2026 recruiting class. Carthage running back KJ Edwards, the top-ranked tailback in the state in this cycle, and a top 3 running back nationally, committed to Texas A&M out of the blue yesterday. Just about every insider in the business thought KJ Edwards was going to Texas, myself included. I'll admit, I was wrong. I felt very good about where the Longhorns stood for KJ Edwards, and unfortunately, he canceled his visit that he had to Austin coming up for this week and decided to commit to the Aggies yesterday. Now, the good news, National Signing Day isn't until December, so maybe the Horns still have a shot. The bad news, well, do I even need to explain? KJ Edwards wasn't supposed to commit until August. Again, he was supposed to come visit Austin this weekend. He changed his mind, or something changed. Who knows what the Aggies did, but I do know that they were able to land a commitment from KJ Edwards yesterday, and I do know that that is a big blow for Texas as the Longhorns try to get some running backs committed and ultimately signed in this class of 2026. So that's the bad news. Now, where do the Longhorns go from here? Well, another guy that we've talked about a lot here on this channel, 4-star running back Xavier Crowell from the state of Georgia, another top 3 ranked tailback in the country for 2026. Texas is still in the mix there. Crowell was just on campus this past weekend. That's the good, but we've touched on this one a lot as well. Alabama seemingly the favorite in this one. I mean, Xavier Crowell currently has an Alabama decal on the back of the car that he drives. Like, he grew up an Alabama fan. He's got family in the state of Alabama. Alabama, obviously a lot closer to Georgia than Texas is. So, look, maybe Texas ramps up its recruiting efforts a little bit more now that KJ Edwards is out of the picture. Maybe they go all in on Xavier Crowell, and they're able to convince him to come to Austin instead of going to Tuscaloosa. We will find out that answer later this month. I believe June 26th is the current scheduled commitment date for Xavier Crowell. So this Texas staff will get an answer, or at least some clarity for an answer, before the calendar turns to July. But again, as of this moment, I feel like that's a bit of a long shot. I feel like Texas is on the outside looking in the proverbial Xavier Crowell sweepstakes. So those have kind of been the top 2 guys that Texas fans have been honing in on throughout this cycle. And again, KJ Edwards was the guy I think everybody felt better about. He's off to A&M, at least as of right now, and then Xavier Crowell leaning Alabama. So if Crowell commits elsewhere, Texas kind of has to hit the reset button. And look, I don't want to panic yet. Again, about 6 months away till National Signing Day. There's still some other good running back targets that are out there that Texas could be very involved in. But, man, that's a tough start for Chad Scott, the new Texas running backs coach. You know, it's the benefit of the doubt, right? You want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He walked into a pretty tough situation, having to replace Tashard Choice in the middle of a recruiting cycle. And it's never easy for any coach, I don't care what school you're at, to pick up where the previous coach left off. And you think about how good Tashard Choice was, right? That previous running backs coach at Texas. I mean, one of the best running back coaches, one of the best recruiters in all of college football. Like, that guy had done a great job developing relationships with KJ Edwards, with Xavier Crowell, with some of these other top backs in this class. All of a sudden, Tashard Choice leaves for the NFL, and Chad Scott, he's got to come in and recreate that relationship. Obviously, it's the same school, it's the same program, but your position coach, that's the guy you're going to spend the most time with when you get to campus. So that relationship really matters. You want to know, you want to trust that that's the right guy for you and for your game. And while all of these other schools around the country didn't change their running backs coaches, Texas obviously did. So that put the Longhorns behind the 8 ball a little bit. But I think it's safe to say that coach choice is missed right now. Again, unfair to Chad Scott. Not an easy situation for him to walk into, but the early returns not the best for him. So where does Texas go from here? Again, Crowell is now priority number 1, but I don't feel great about him coming to Texas. So let's assume that my hunch is right and he ends up going to Alabama or somewhere else. What's next for Chad Scott, Steve Sarkisian, and the Longhorns? Well, we've got 3 names to pay attention to. We'll start with Derek Cooper, a 5-star, a top 30 player in the country from the state of Florida. He'd be great. Texas very interested. The Longhorns have offered. All of those are good things, but the not so good things, there's no official visit set up for Derek Cooper to come to Austin, and we are nearing the end of the recruiting summer. Remember, July is a dead period this year, so everyone's getting their summer visits out of the way in June. This is the last big OV weekend that Texas has in the month of June, coming up this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and barring a last-minute change, Derek Cooper will not be here. So I'm not sure a visit's coming, and because of that, I'm not sure Texas is truly in the mix here. This is a guy who's got offers from everywhere, a guy who has been taking official visits to other blue blood caliber programs, and if you don't get a visit in the summer, that usually doesn't mean good things for your chances of landing somebody. So for now, Derek Cooper probably not in the best of standing with this Texas staff. Another name, Isaiah Lee from Lancaster up in the Metroplex. Some people call it Lancaster. I went to college with a kid from Lancaster, and he always said Lancaster, and he got mad when I said Lancaster. So hopefully I'm not bothering anybody with that one. Isaiah Lee is currently committed to Vanderbilt, 3-star running back, the 32nd ranked running back in the class. Now, before you scoff at that and shake your head, don't forget, Trey Wisner was a 3-star. I think he was the 27th ranked running back in the country coming out of high school, also from the Metroplex at DeSoto. So Trey Wisner, the only returning 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC. Don't sleep on the 3-stars. I say it all of the time. Texas is starting running back. Hell, the starting running back on potentially the preseason number 1 team in America was a 3-star. So Isaiah Lee, again, 3-star. Not the level of recruit that Xavier Crowell or KJ Edwards is, but a name to keep an eye on. Texas has not offered Isaiah Lee. Some big schools have. Oregon, Ole Miss, Missouri, Texas A&M, a lot of other schools around the state. I know TCU and Baylor and Houston have offered as well. So Isaiah Lee, even though he doesn't have a Texas offer, the Longhorns wouldn't be going out on some flimsy limb and just, nobody knows about this kid. Nobody else has offered, but we're going to try because we're that desperate. No, this guy has a lot of big-time offers from major power programs. So Isaiah Lee, again, no Texas offer now, currently committed to Vanderbilt. If a Texas offer came, would he flip? You don't know. But, the opportunity to play tailback at the University of Texas, that doesn't come around that often. So I have no indication yet that Texas is super interested in doing that. But that's another name. Again, if Texas feels like they're not going to get KJ Edwards or Xavier Crowell, and they do have to hit the reset button and go back to the drawing board, it's a name to keep an eye on. And last but not least, Jet Walker, another 3-star from Georgetown in Central Texas, currently committed to West Virginia. He's the 43rd ranked running back in the class, and another guy who does not currently possess a Texas offer. Unlike Isaiah Lee, Jet Walker doesn't have a lot of high major offers right now. West Virginia is probably the best one he has, so you understand why he's committed there. I know he's got a Houston offer as well, but I didn't see any SEC schools. I didn't see any Big Ten schools on the ledger for Jet Walker as at this moment. This would maybe be a late take where Texas it's 2 days before signing day, and Steve Sarkisian's like, well, we don't have a running back currently committed, and we really need one in this class, so let's just offer the local kid Jet Walker, and maybe he says yes because, well, he's a local kid who grew up in Central Texas, and he wants to play at the University of Texas. That's, again, another guy. It's all early. I don't know exactly how Texas feels about Jet Walker right now. I would say doubtful that he does get an offer, but if we get to that point where it is crunch time and Texas doesn't have any running backs they're about to sign, maybe Jet Walker gets that last-minute offer. So who knows? Texas likes to bring in 2 running backs in every class. They did this past year with James Simon and Ricky Stewart. Maybe they'll end up, getting KJ Edwards. I think Texas is going to recruit him until the very end, and they're going to try to get him to flip away from A&M. If the Aggies are 8-4 and Texas is 11-1 going into the postseason, maybe KJ Edwards is like, you know what, I'd rather be a part of that winning team instead of a little brother in College Station. Who knows? I don't think the Longhorns are going to give up on this one. And I think the hope is, if you're a Texas fan, is that running back is the new defensive line. What do I mean by that? Well, last year at the end of June, Josiah Sharma and Myron Charles both committed to other schools, one to Florida State, one to Oregon. And it was kind of like, well, where does Texas go from here? Those were their 2 top D-line targets, and they're not a part of this class. What happens now? Well, Texas was able to do enough to get those guys to flip and ultimately sign with Texas. And, oh, by the way, it was a first-year coach with Kenny Baker in his first year taking over midway through a recruiting cycle. Texas was able to do what it needed to do to get those 2 guys. Obviously, Justice Terry, the belle of the ball at the very end of the cycle. Maybe that's what Texas does at running back. That's, I guess, the hope, right? Is you're able to get at least one of those guys to flip before it's all said and done. So not time to hit the panic button just yet. Unfortunate news and a big stunner. Don't get me wrong. This is not what Texas people expected. This was not what I expected. And I didn't enjoy seeing it come across my Twitter timeline yesterday. But long way to go until that final whistle. And Texas has some other options at running back. And they have a very deep running back room for now and for the future as well, even if things don't go the way that Horns fans want in 2026. All right, enough about the people not coming to Texas, at least right now, not coming to Texas. Let's talk about a few guys who will be coming to Texas this weekend during the last OV visit of the month. Some big names and some top targets for Texas. We'll talk about them up next right here on Locked On Longhorns. But first, a word for our friends at Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, entertainment, online shopping, there's a lot going on in the summertime in Texas. Hey, there's a lot going on in the summertime wherever you're tuned in today. It's easy to lose track of your spending. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. They are your personal CFO, giving you full control and visibility over all of your finances. I promise you, Monarch Money is not another run-of-the-mill budgeting app. Monarch Money is different. Everything that you need is all there in one place at your fingertips. All of your credit cards, your debit cards, your investments, your bank accounts. If you're married and you and your wife have accounts together or separate, you could put them all in one place at Monarch Money so you can keep track of all of your spending and you can actually start building wealth instead of just trying to manage your budget. That's what Monarch Money does. They let you take control of your finances. And right now, they are hooking you up with 50% off your first year. That's right. Just head over to monarchmoney.com. You make an account and you use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You are going to get half off your first year. Again, LOCKEDONCollege, that's the code. The website is monarchmoney.com. And you're going to get 50% off your first year from our great friends at Monarch Money. All right, welcome back to Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. Another huge weekend for Texas on the recruiting trail. The last of 3 massive, monster, mammoth, insert word like that here to describe just how big this weekend is for Texas. By my count, and as of this moment, 19 Texas targets for 2026 will be in town. That number could go up, that number could go down, but it's a lot, regardless of how you spin it and what the number ultimately ends up at. A lot of high-priority guys will be in Austin, and we're taking a look at a few different positions in this segment, starting with tight end. Very similar to running back, the tight end spot does not have a lot of margin for error. we've talked about Hezi Kent, maybe my favorite target in this class, the 6'5", 300-pound athlete from the state of Georgia. He was in town this past weekend. 4-star player, top 150 player in the class. That's a guy that Texas is obviously going after. But and Texas also has 2 more guys coming in this weekend. Caden Prothro, one of the top 3 tight ends in the class, and Q Brown from the state of California. Both of those guys will be here this weekend. Texas is in a precarious spot, though, because Mark Bowman, the number 1 tight end in this class, a guy that Texas wanted, a guy that Texas was in the mix for a while, from the state of California, ends up committing to USC. It sounds like USC dropped the bag, so I don't know if the Longhorns' chances of flipping him are all that good. Caden Prothro, again, he will be here this weekend. That's the good, but from people I've talked to, it sounds like he is leaning Georgia right now. We'll see if Texas can convince him otherwise this weekend. So it's important because I think Bowman and Prothro are kind of Texas's 2 top choices in their perfect world at tight end. Again, Prothro coming to town, that's the good news. Texas has a pretty good track record of, hey, once they get guys on campus, they're able to get guys to commit. Maybe that's the case with him. But if Texas does miss out on Prothro, then Hezi Kent and Brown from California, like those guys are going to be big-time priority targets for Texas. So again, a couple of tight end targets for the Longhorns. Prothro, a 4-star, Brown, a 3-star. Both guys will be here this weekend. And Texas, again, running, I want to say running out of options, but a lot of their top targets in that tight end room are starting to lean or commit elsewhere. So it's, hopefully Texas gets a little bit of good news there. Here's where the good news has been coming. The defensive line. And what a fun 3 weeks it's been for Kenny Baker and Alan Clark and Pete Kwiatkowski and Johnny Nansen and the rest of the Texas defensive staff. You know, the Longhorns already have a couple of defensive linemen committed in this class. A couple of guys from out of state who took visits to Austin a few weeks ago and ended up committing to the University of Texas. Like, there could be more coming there. And for the weekend of June 20th, you got Trenton Henderson, James Johnson, Tyler Atkinson, Richard Wesley, Kosi Opala, Calvin Thomas, Luke Waffle. I mean, it is loaded. This might be the most star-studded defensive front 7 weekend of any school in the country. Like, the quantity and quality of D-line prospects that Texas has hosted over the last 2 weekends. The guys I named are the guys coming this weekend, but Texas hosted a bunch of studs this past weekend as well. Yeah, Sark, he's not being shy. He wants to build through the trenches. You look at what Alabama had with Nick Saban when they were on that dynastic run. You look at Kirby Smart's 2 national championship teams at Georgia, built through the trenches, and those guys had war daddy after war daddy after war daddy. And those D-lines were loaded with talent. Inside, outside, you name it. Just game-wrecking players up front on defense. Texas has had a few of them these last few years. Guys like Tobias Sweat, Byron Murphy, and Alfred Collins. They want more of them moving forward. Like, Texas got 5 portal players at that spot. They're letting you know that that is a huge priority for them, and they have hosted a lot of great defensive linemen, again, over these past couple of weeks. They're already in a good spot at that position. Hopefully they're in a better spot by the end of the summer. So you talk about casting a wide net. Yeah, that is what Texas is doing right now on the defensive side of the ball, especially up front on defense. Very encouraging. You know, landing these game changers is always going to be a challenge, but very encouraging to see that all of these names are at least coming to the University of Texas campus. Yeah, great news there. And last but not least, the face of the 2026 Texas recruiting class, Dia Bell, will be on campus. It always helps when you have the quarterback here. And oh, by the way, Dia Bell is in California right now competing in the Elite 11. It'd be pretty cool if he wins that thing and then comes back to Austin and can brag about that. And it's like, hey, you guys want to be my teammate, right? Like, you see, I was just better than any other quarterback in this class. You want to be a part of my team at Texas, don't you? It'd be a pretty good selling point for Dia Bell and for Steve Sarkisian as well. But it's a big weekend. I mean, the fact that Dia Bell is here is a great thing. Texas also has a few other offensive commits in town this weekend, and there are a few top targets. Wide receiver Caden Finley, offensive tackle John Turntine III. Both of those guys will be here. Those are hotly contested recruitments at the moment, and they're big priority players for Texas. So the Longhorns doing whatever they can to try to get those guys to ultimately sign with Texas, and those guys will help us kind of figure out what the 2026 class is looking like. Last year, quarterback KJ Lacey was here for the final official visit weekend of the summer. KJ Lacey and Bo Barnes were here, one of the top offensive commits, one of the top defensive commits. Those guys were in town, already committed to Texas, and those guys were able to help Texas ultimately land Jamie French, Khalik Lockett, Cade Phillips, Nick Townsend. All four of those guys were in town with those two Texas commits for the final official visit weekend in 2024. And all of those guys committed. So you wonder what type of impact. Oh, Diabell's committed. Why does it matter if he's here? That's why it matters that he's here. Peer recruiting is massive. You guys spend a lot of time with your teammates, don't you? Especially the guys in your class. Having Texas commits, especially a guy like Diabell, one of the top players in the class at the most important position on the field, having him here to help the coaches and the recruiting staff, that could pay serious dividends. So, again, by my count, 19 players in town this weekend. A few guys already committed to Texas, but obviously a few more that we all hope will eventually be committed to Texas. We'll take your thoughts below. Your thoughts on running back, tight end, quarterback, defense, everything we've touched on through these first two segments. Always love hearing from y'all. All right, let's shift gears here. We've got one segment left. Let's talk a little Texas basketball. Earlier today, the Longhorns 25-26 SEC schedule was released, and I'm wondering if the SEC is trying to create a new rivalry. I'll tell you what I'm talking about coming up next right here on Locked On Longhorns. Welcome back to Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. Over the last 2 days, both the Texas men's and Texas women's SEC opponent schedule have been released. We don't have dates and times just yet, but we do have opponents for who Texas will play. And there are a couple of repeat opponents. Obviously, you play everybody in this conference at least once, but you do get a couple of home and homes. And we now have some more details on who gets the home and homes for Texas. And, of course, where Texas will be playing their conference games this coming year. We'll start with the men's team. Texas will once again play 18 conference games. So they will have 3 repeat opponents this season. But before we get to those 3 teams, the biggest headline, at least for me, Chris Beard returns to the mood. That's right. Texas only plays Ole Miss once, but the game will be in Austin. Last year, these two teams played in Oxford. This year, it's here. What type of reaction does Chris Beard get in his first game at Moody Center since losing his job as the head coach of the Texas men's basketball team? That's going to be a ruckus crowd. Hopefully, Texas is really good. Ole Miss made a second weekend run in the NCAA tournament last year. That's a good team. I think we all know Chris Beard's a good coach. What type of welcome does he get from the Burnt Orange faithful? I am fascinated. That's like my number one game that I want to see this year, just to see how the crowd treats Chris Beard when he gets to town. I don't know if anyone's going to cheer him. I think it's going to be a lot of boos for Chris Beard, but is it as hostile as when he was the Texas coach and Texas went to play in Lubbock? I doubt it'll be that, but that's an interesting one. And again, Chris Beard was able to avoid the Austin trip in his first year in Oxford, not able to avoid it in year 2. I mentioned that Texas plays 3 opponents twice. Oklahoma is one of them, no surprise. Texas A&M is one of them, no surprise. Those are your 2 biggest rivals. You should be playing those teams twice a year, every year, right? You should get an opportunity to hate on the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas A&M Aggies in person in every sport every single year. So those 2 are repeats, but the third is interesting. I think most Texas fans would say Arkansas is the 3rd biggest SEC rival for the Longhorns. And last year, Texas and Arkansas also played a home and home. But this year, it's Georgia. Georgia is the 3rd team that Texas will play twice in conference play. I wonder if the SEC is trying to make Texas, Georgia the next big rivalry in this conference. It already feels like it's turning into one in football, and these two teams played twice last year. Obviously, one of those games was for the SEC championship. They'll play at least once this year. They'll potentially play twice this year. They could meet again in the SEC title game in early December. So it feels like there's something budding in football. Is the SEC trying to expand that beyond the gridiron? I don't know. I found that interesting because, again, Arkansas would be the team that makes the most sense. If you want to go regional, maybe LSU would make more sense. I don't know, but it's Texas and Georgia. Good news is, Georgia made the tournament last year, but they're not like one of the best teams in the SEC. So from a quality of opponent standpoint, I think you'd rather have Georgia versus Arkansas and some of the other teams that you could be seeing twice. But I feel like the SEC is trying to make fetch happen. They're trying to make Texas, Georgia a big rivalry in the conference moving forward. And, hey, I'm all for it. I'm okay with not playing Georgia in football every year because they're usually really good. But there's going to be a lot of big games between the Horns and the Dogs in the not-too-distant future. And apparently it's not just in football. Road trips. Man, Texas has to go to Alabama, to Auburn, to Tennessee, and to Kentucky. Four of the best teams in the SEC you have to play on the road this season. You do get the defending champion Florida Gators in Austin. That's going to be a big game. That's going to be a big-time atmosphere at the Mood. But, man, you've got some tough road trips to make this season. Most of your weaker opponents are home games. South Carolina and LSU, the two teams that didn't make the tournament in the SEC. You get those games in Austin. You get Mississippi State in Austin. You get Vanderbilt in Austin. So some opportunities there for Texas. But again, Sean Miller's first year, he's going to have his work cut out for him. We've talked about the non-con slate. You've got a game against Duke. That's basically a road game because it's in Charlotte. You've got a road game against UConn. You've got to play Virginia in the SEC ACC Challenge. You've got to play in the Maui Invitational. And, Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, and Tennessee all away from home. Not the easiest slate. Nobody should be questioning how tough Texas basketball's schedule is this year because there is a lot of tough opponents coming up. All right, we don't have time for the women's schedule. We will talk about the Texas women's schedule a little bit later in the week, but we've got to wrap things up for today. Want to get your thoughts. Is Texas, Georgia the next big rivalry in the SEC? Can you get on board with that? Or do you think Texas has enough rivals already with OU, A&M, and Arkansas? Always love hearing from y'all. And, hey, if you've made it this far, number one, thank you. Number two, please remember to like, share, subscribe, rate 5 stars, all of those great things. Really do appreciate y'all making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day. For your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked On Portal Show. They're talking all things recruiting, not just for Texas, but all around the SEC and all around college football. You could be the most informed fan wherever you are if you tune into the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, recruiting and portal talk nonstop. Brian Smith has you covered. We will continue to preview the big official visit weekend for Texas. We will talk about that Texas women's basketball SEC schedule and plenty more. And never a dull moment on the 40 acres. We got you covered with everything you need to know right here on Locked On Longhorns. But that'll do it for today. Until next time, horns up, mics off. We'll see y'all soon. This is Locked On Longhorns.